So is John Mayer making an amp plugin that you will soon be able to go out and buy and have access to these captures of his own personal amplifiers? And it kind of sounds like that very well might be the case, that is something that John is working on. During Life with John Mayer's Thanksgiving special, John took some phone calls and some texts from audience members, and in one call he was demonstrating the guitar, and then he goes on to actually mention, and I'm going to play the clip for you guys. It took me absolutely forever to track this clip down, so I'm super excited to actually have it to be able to play it for you guys. But John mentions while he's playing guitar, he goes, "What if I told you this was a plugin?" And then he kind of makes some, I think, intentional hints at what might be to come. So I'm going to play this footage for you guys, and then we're going to get into a bit of a discussion on it.
I also have the guitar, and I've got a new plugin that has all of my amps in it. And you'll hear more about that at some point. But this is what I'm playing through right now is a plug-in emulation of all of my amps. So if I go... It's coming through the computer. Here, let me put one more thing on here and you'll know what I'm talking about. I will put on... So like when I'm playing on stage, and I do believe... What if I told you that was a plugin? What if I... You're all having Thanksgiving dinner. You're just having yams, and I'm going... I'm telling you. It's coming at you. Anyway, I thought I would use music to explain music. Sometimes words just don't do the trick.
All right, so I was pretty surprised when I first heard about this. I didn't catch the stream live, but I had a few comments on the channel. I had a ton of messages of people asking me, hey, did you hear about John talking about the plugins? Because especially for those who use amp simulation, use plugins for their main guitar sound, live recording, or just as a hobbyist, this could be potentially a really big deal if John actually does make plugins that then you can go out and purchase that are based on his sound. And I wanted to wait to actually make this video until I had the audio myself so that I could hear exactly the way that John said it, because that I think is very important, the language that he actually used during the part where he talked about these plugins. And the part to me that makes this really interesting is when John says, okay, so he's like, I got a new plugin that has all of my amps in it, and you're going to hear about that soon. Like more details about that soon is essentially what he is saying. Now, he's not just mentioning, oh, like, yeah, I have a plugin with all my amps in it. That's, really cool for me to use for scenarios like this. No, he kind of drops that hint where he says, to me at least, it definitely sounds like he goes, you're going to hear more about that soon. So they're early on, maybe in like the development phase of this and kind of the testing phase of this, because John is someone who is so particular about his sound. So if him and Jeremy, assuming Jeremy's kind of involved in it as well, his guitar tech, if they're making these captures of his amplifiers, working on the sounds, he demonstrates slow dancing, he demonstrates the overdriven lead sound of Belief, that's kind of, things that he'd want to test out, obviously, and make sure that sound up to his standards. Number one, for his own playing, so that he sounds like himself. Yes, his hands, of course, he sounded brilliant. Let's, not gloss over that, obviously, but the more kind of key part to this specific discussion is that the amps kind of can feel as much as they can for a digital recreation. They can feel as much as they can like his own amplifiers, and they sound, most importantly, like his own amplifiers and his own tone as well. So the fact that John does say you're going to hear more about this soon, I think is pretty key to the indication that they might actually be planning something, maybe some different collab with Neural DSP or Quad Cortex or whoever, Fractal. Like you don't know, right? They could be planning something that then could eventually be released as an official collaboration with John, which I think the entire plugin amp simulator, that whole world that I'm, to be honest, not really a part of at all, but I think that whole world especially will go absolutely crazy. And then more people who haven't gotten into it might think, well, you know what? I want to give it a shot because now John's actually made these captures of his own amplifiers. I want to get into that, maybe that kind of gear part and everything, and actually start, trying out plugins for the first time for myself, because John has now made captures of his amplifiers and really nailed down his sound in that way. Now, John also certainly isn't new to these sorts of things. He used the quad cortex when he performed Automatic Yes at Coachella with Zed, which was really awesome. You have the Fractal as well, which famously was used for the Studio Clean preset, which was used for Wild Blue, actually on Sob Rock, which is pretty amazing. And then even when it came to John discussing the Sphere residency that Dead & Company did at the start of 2025, he mentions things like the Universal Audio Enigmatic, which he really liked, although he didn't choose to actually use it like the Edge did for the U2 residency that they did to actually open up Sphere. But he talked about how he really liked it. It just wasn't quite there in terms of a feeling thing, so that's why he threw his amps in shipping crates and everything and had this whole elaborate setup to actually still have that feel element and really make it work. But now to hear that he's got, okay, plugins, captures of all of his amplifiers, that could be really huge, because you'd obviously expect there to be like Dumble Still String Singer 002, maybe 004, the Bandmasters, the Ultraphonics modded Bandmaster, the 2-Rock John Mayer Signature, maybe the 2-Rock Custom Reverb Signature 83. That might be in there, his Vibe Reverb. The kind of options at this point are really endless. And then to add into it, I assume that it's all a plugin with the drive sounds as well, like we heard for Belief. If John and Jeremy and whoever else they might be like collaborating with, if they go through and actually develop a plugin that then gets up to John's standards, that then you can go out and get your hands on. And I don't know, I just think this would be really, really huge. John's never done something quite like this before, if this is what they in fact actually go out and do. He's released signature amplifiers, signature guitars, signature strings. He's done, kind of Josh Scott kind of released the Box It Later a little bit, or the plan is to release a variation of the circuit of the Box It Later with the Not a Dumble V2, you kind of assume, which basically is a John Mayer signature pedal in there. He's done certain things like that, but he's never gone out and actually had something that's more like, okay, this is, my sound in this sort of way, and kind of like a whole package, more or less, like you would expect out of some plugins. And the one thing I will say too is that the sound that John got during Life with John Mayer is the best John Mayer sound that is like in that form of like a plugin that I have ever heard by, I think, a good amount. The drive sound on Blue.
What if I told you that was a plugin? What if I...
Sounded really, really great, and that's always where I feel like those kind of things, it's kind of the weaker area in terms of, the cleans are really good if like an amp simulator, an amp capture, but then when you try and do some more overdriven sounds, that's where they kind of can fall apart a little bit and just don't sound quite right. But of course, John's hand's playing a major role in that, but also I think it sounded really, really good. And, through just hearing it through this audio, it just sounds like a great recording of John playing live. You couldn't necessarily really tell, to be honest, that it was a plugin without him actually saying that. I don't think if John hadn't said this is a new plugin and kind of, made that the point of what he was, talking about with the playing, I don't think anyone would have actually been like, oh, like, sounds like he's playing through something digital. Some people might have assumed, oh yeah, maybe he's got like a Vibe Reverb or a deluxe reverb or whatever, a 2-Rock that's mic'd up, and then that's what we're hearing, right? I don't think anyone would have pointed that out. That's how good it sounded. So if you are someone who uses like a Fractal or a quad cortex, I think this is where the excitement can really start to build, and kind of a bit of a waiting game starts now, because it's like, all right, John says you're going to hear more about that in a little bit, or we hear about that soon. Now it's kind of just like a waiting game to actually hear more. Is this in fact John actually coming out with a plugin, an amp capture pack, or whatever? And if it's the case, I think it's the biggest no-brainer for anyone who's doing that, who wants the John Mayer tone. You're going to have something that is up to John's standards, approved by the man himself and designed by John himself to do those sounds and, of course, a lot more. I think if John does that, it's going to sell absurdly well. It's going to be like one of the #1 amp capture packs of all time. I believe I'm saying kind of how that works, right? I don't know. It's not my thing. I have, I'm fortunate enough to have, real amplifiers as a hobbyist guitarist that I use. So I don't have a lot of experience about how these things work, but I assume capture packs would be kind of how it would be done, or like a Mayer, pack where it has the drive sounds in it, the amps, that kind of sort of thing. But I think it's an absolute no-brainer. And it's, that's the one to get at this point if it actually comes out. Signed by John himself. It might be something I have to even check out just because I think it would be really cool to hear it and just kind of experience something like that designed by John. So this could potentially be really big news. It could also just be a thing where John's like, yeah, like we just did a quick little collaboration with X company and, we're going to release it as a pack. Even then, I still think it'd be really insane and really, really cool because there's obviously some sort of level of involvement with John, whether or not it's kind of like massively like marketed by John or, whatever, however that goes remains obviously yet to be seen. Or it could end up just being like, yeah, like for like certain scenarios now, here's kind of what I got going on and John just more speaks to it and we never actually have it released. But that'd be quite the tease for it to go that way. It almost sounds like he's kind of like, hey guys, what if I told you this was a plugin? And to me, the way John was kind of talking, he sounds pretty proud of it, and he should be. It sounds really, really good. So I don't know. I definitely wanted to make a video and kind of just give my thoughts and my take on this because this could be something pretty huge, especially for those of you who are into the whole Fractal amp capture sort of scene. To have one from John, I think would be really incredible, and it'd make me very jealous. I'd be like, all right, John, that's really amazing. I'm happy for everyone who's into that sort of thing. Come out with like a signature pedal or something more that like, people like me can use. I think would also be really cool, but definitely amazing. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below. And I'm so happy to have actually found the audio for it, which was really huge. The community is amazing when, I ask on my Instagram story, hey, if anyone has the audio, and I have a few different people reach out with it. Is really, truly awesome. So I appreciate the community, you guys helping me out when I kind of need a little bit of help for things like this. It's always very much appreciated. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah, now we just wait and see, what that hear more about it in a little bit, more about it soon actually means and what John was actually talking about. Now the waiting game begins. So, hopefully maybe, sometime early 2026, we will hear more. Take care, you guys. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you on the next video.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.